Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit about some purchasing strategies and sort of legal protection that's also involved when you're buying something. They don't talk so much about vehicles in this chapter. This is more, I mean, they do talk about vehicles, not so much about housing. We'll spend a whole another lecture on housing. And I'm going to send at least 10, 15 minutes at the end to talk more about the project, because I know we keep skipping along and we keep saying we're going to get to it. So at that point, at a certain point, I'll just stop with the slides and we'll talk about the project, and then we'll come back to the lecture on Thursday. So consumer buying, purchases, problems, and legal alternatives. So the deal with any purchasing program is people, it's kind of insidious. They tend to get themselves wrapped up in these small little payments, but they all involve interest, and they all just sort of eke away at that available money that you have for perhaps investments and other things. So there's a lot of ways to minimize some of those payments, and some it has into just smart purchasing. We've talked about this before. I got on a couple people's wrong side last class, or actually I guess it was last spring, where I had both a BMW salesman and a student whose husband was a salesman in Alaska Sales and Service. And, I was saying that in terms of investment, I mean, vehicles are not good. I mean, granted, they're, if that's what you enjoy to do with your money and all, but in terms of necessity, vehicles are probably one of the worst investments you can have. You need, especially, with winter coming and, you have families and things like that, you need to have something that's safe and reliable. But in terms of the over-the-top stuff, or the replacing it quite often is probably not smart from an investment perspective. The other thing about vehicles is, too, that, used cars used to be 100,000 miles and they were done. Now people are just kind of getting started. So out of necessity, people are driving the snot out of cars. And the used car market, too, now you go to look at used cars and, it's hard to find one with less than 150,000 miles. I've got a truck that, in fact, I've got it out there in the lot today. It's a beater, but it just keeps going. It's perfect for the winter. But, anyway, most people do have, or if they have the opportunity, will have some sort of, beater with a heater for the winter, and then something perhaps nice that they don't have to drive all the time, and maybe a little bit more in the summer. But anyway, there's other things too. There's a whole bunch of different brands, and traditionally brands will come onto the market in terms of vehicles that are, of pretty questionable quality, and then after a while they work their way in there. Anybody got a Daewoo? Daewoo's and Suzuki's? I would not necessarily say they've migrated out of that kind of low quality status, but Hyundai and even Volkswagen at a certain point was known as a cheap vehicle, and now, well, that's a whole other issue what's going on with Volkswagen. But anyway, they now are, were sort of a prestige brand, at least they were European. So anyway, things change. Commonly overlooked trade-offs. So yeah, sometimes also, especially here in Alaska, if you do, and again, I haven't seen too many Daewoo's up here or Suzuki's, but I'm not sure where you get some of those vehicles even serviced. I run into that a lot of times with heavy equipment where there's some off brands. I've got a Hitachi bulldozer, and Hitachi it's gray market. It's a Japanese. It's not meant to be imported, so getting parts of that is a nightmare. It's a bulldozer. It's not a daily driver, so it's not a big deal. I can wait for parts. But if it was my primary vehicle, yeah, that would be a serious problem. There's Hitachi dealers in town, but they don't stock the stuff, and there's John Deere dealers. And for those of you who don't know that, John Deere, great American brand, it's owned by Hitachi. It's been owned by Hitachi for quite some time. So anyway, none of it bites the dust. Also, ordering by mail or online to save time and money, but return or repair may be difficult. Sometimes, most of these online, at least in terms of clothing, garments type stuff, man, their return policies are pretty easy. You know, there's usually a tag in there, and it's almost easier than going back to the store. You buy something on eBay, yeah, good luck with that. It depends on the vendor, but especially if it's coming from China or something, they might take it back, but how you're actually going to get it to them is going to be difficult. And time and effort to comparison shop. But a lot of times, you know, what you kind of do is a blended type thing. And unfortunately, if you're somebody like Best Buy, they actually end up as being more of a showroom. You know, people will go in there and you know, see what they want. And maybe if it's a big screen, they're going to buy it there. But a lot of times, you know, they'll want to touch something, you know, some computer or laptop or whatever, and then they'll order it online for a better price. But Best Buy is kind of aware of that. They do a price matching with some stuff. So the big deal with Best Buy is, especially, they'll match their online prices, which you know, probably in the States is lower 48 is probably the same thing, but up here there's always a little bit of a, you know, Alaska premium, so you can save a few bucks just by you know, having a smartphone with you and showing them a picture of the same item on their website, and they'll match it. In terms of, you know, consumer factors for purchases, so yeah, it does really depend. You know, the you know, supply and demand factor. There's a lot going on, you know, here in the next couple of days with PFDs coming out. So you're going to see a bunch of sales, and, you know, especially car dealers and things like that. Are the prices better, or is there more demand because people have money and their prices are actually about the same, if not higher? And anyway, it depends on the dealership. Personal factors, yeah, your own income. Again, you know, right now with Alaska, we took another hit yesterday with Shell pulling out. So, you know, the oil business and the oil prices are probably going to drive the state probably in a downward trend in terms of major, you know, real estate purchases and stuff. You know, what I had said before about potentially it's going into a rougher market, that might actually develop here after a while. Social factors, lifestyle, culture. So anyway, those social factors too, they may get you in a position where, you know, where you don't need to be. Like I say, I mean, it doesn't mean you necessarily don't need to have a, you know, a nice car, but maybe the model from 1 or 2 years before would be better. Sometimes though, the you know, especially if you're buying from a private party, you know, the pricing up here is so screwed up. People will think, you know, what they have is worth $1 million, and so again, just because it's used doesn't mean it's a good deal. You do have to shop a bit, and there's obviously a number of companies up here that, you know, make their money from bringing cars largely from Seattle up here to resell. You know, there's a number of car dealers that do that, and you know, maybe if you went down there direct and worked it out and brought it up yourself, you might be better off. But again, that's a little bit of pain, but might be worth your money. Timing purchases, you know, this has kind of bit some of the retail folks where now people, you know, don't want to buy stuff at Christmas time unless it is on sale. So they kind of, you know, they have the big sales, the big promotions, and so it's actually restrained a bit. But anyway, there are still certain times of the year that might be better depending on the product. But as long as it's still useful, you know, if you're thinking that far ahead. Store selection, you know, I mean, there are, again, you know, as the seasons change and you're going to plan ahead and actually use something, you might get some sort of closeout, but a lot of times they just return it to stock. Store selection, cooperatives, nonprofit, you know, again, you know, most people might have a membership at, say, Sam's or Costco, but their prices are sometimes better, sometimes not a whole lot different. And if you have to buy in bulk and you may not, you know, use all that product, it may not really be a true savings. But again, depends how much you want to shop. Brand comparison, stores versus national brands, you know, the generics versus the others. You know what you're kind of up against there. And the label stuff, especially, you know, on certain things like medication, that's pretty easy. You know, you can look at the active ingredients and they'll say what they are. If they are equivalent, then maybe you should get the generic one. But on other items, there sometimes are differences that might be worth paying for. But anyway, take a look. So you can spend your entire career, doing price comparisons and the coupons and all that, and I can't argue with you. I would be, I will certainly do some coupons now and then, but again, there's like $5 ones on dog food. That certainly is something I go through and I would jump on, but the 50-cent ones or whatever, I may not be drawn to that. Again, that's kind of up to you and how you do it, but there are so many retail sites now too that have coupons, and then there's other sites that just have collections of their coupons. So again, when you're ordering something online, you go to Retail Me Not or one of those sites, and you can often find a free shipping or other coupon. Half the time they don't work, but the other half the time they do work. So there you go. The warranties, service contracts. This kind of strays into housing because this is where I know a little about service contracts, and there's contracts out there that are not worth much at all. I had a service contract on a home I bought up here, and it had a covered the well and everything else. And so the salesman's good that they want to give you that peace of mind, but then you find out what it covers. Not much, if anything. Fortunately, I had a good well provider who wrote up the damage correctly, because if it said that the failure was due to rust, normal wear and tear, just about anything, it was not going to be covered. And a lot of times the people selling you the contracts, we got in this discussion with the real estate people, and you can be kind of the person like the salmon going upstream saying, nope, I'm not going to sell these contracts, but in the end, the customers want them. They're not that expensive, and they have that peace of mind. But in terms of a good product, any salesperson who says that they're a good product is probably never explored them, because they're the limitations on what they'll pay for. When they did pay for my well, I think it was $2,800 altogether, and I got $600, and that was kicking and screaming to get that out of them. I recently had another incident. This was through my own fault. Had a big screen TV just come off the wall. 40 inch. Anyway, crashed. Whatever. Wasn't secured quite as well as it should have been. It was actually the bracket that failed, but it was a cheesy bracket. And anyway, so I went to the store, sucked it up, just bought another one. The guy goes, well, you should get the extended warranty program, you would have been covered for that. I'm like, yeah, maybe I will. So I thought about it, and then they were selling a plan secondhand, which is mostly what these things are. Square was the company. And I called them up and I said, hey, if I buy this, TV with this program and it falls off the wall, will you be covered? Well, that's not normal wear and tear. I'm like, okay, exactly. So, the guy in the store, in good faith, was trying to tell me, yeah, I should get this thing, but I would have been the one. I wouldn't have been dealing with the store at that point. I would have been dealing with the insurance company that had the plan, and there's no way they're covering it. Yes?
There was a great Simpsons episode where they invented this machine to reduce Homer's IQ to a specified level, and I think they were poking him with an eraser up the nose or something. And as his IQ went lower and lower and lower till it reached the desired level, he was saying dumber and dumber stuff. When he got to the very bottom, he knew he was dumb enough when he said, "Extended warranty, how can I lose?"
Yeah, exactly. I've got an extended warranty on my, or whatever. It's a third party for my iPhone, and it's like $5 a month. But it's just the new iPhones. They're so big. If you put it in an OtterBox, you can't even hardly fit it in your pocket. So I go with a lesser case and pay $5. But again, you got to know what it covers. Water damage and damage is good to go. But if you don't have the phone, if you lose the phone or it's stolen or whatever, you get nothing. So again, they make it sound like, oh, you're completely safe. Well, I would argue that not most of the times, but a number of times, when you need the phone to get the warranty is what they're saying. So if that's an important thing, and my youngest daughter, yeah, she lost one and gone, nothing. And the warranty doesn't cover it because she didn't have it. My other daughter, there's one floating around down in Clam Gulch. Again, gone, So, but my other daughter, same daughter, she's rough on phones. Got it wet, trashed it, and got a new one within, overnight. So they're good when it's covered, but that's it. Yeah, but the extended warranties more than likely have got significant gaps in coverage. There are some exceptions out there, but especially if they're third party, So they really are just jumping in, to the motor vehicle buying process. And this is a minefield. Most people kind of already have an idea of what they want, before they get there, which is a good thing. That's how you got to be. If you're, just jello and you go walking on the lot, God help you. It's not going to go well for you, especially if you're going to play the game where, in fact, I'll show a video here in a second about payments, where that's the often, you go, okay, I want to pay, no more than whatever, for $32,000 for this, whatever. And you go in there and they're like, oh, well, let's talk about payments. And, what they're doing with the payments oftentimes is extending the payments out. You say you want to pay, whatever, $700 a month or something, and they'll calculate the payments out to some absurd level, 72 months or something like that. Well, 72 months, how many years is that? 6 years. 6 years. So a vehicle with 6 years, most times that's kind of worn out and probably already got a lot of maintenance bills. So now you're paying $700 plus for maintenance, and you're driving kind of a beater. If you stuck with maybe a 4 or 5 year type thing. If you live in the valley, you probably don't want to go any more than 3 or 4 because you're going to have to be turning that thing. That's just the cost of living out there, if you're going to be burning through cars, if you are commuting indeed. So anyway, kind of look at what's out there, evaluating alternatives. Leasing just about always, that's kind of a get you in the door kind of thing. But anybody who really explores all the ramifications and the total cost back in a leasing situation, plus, you never really own it. You give it back at the end and they inspect it as if they're buying it from you, which they never really gave it to you in the first part. Anyway, so leasing is usually not a viable alternative unless you're some corporation or something that's got that kind of write-off. Determining the price up here, it is incredibly difficult to figure out what things are, because you see the range. You see people pay, it's no secret that vehicles in low 48 go for quite a bit less. And sometimes you might have somebody, military-wise, who has got those prices in their head and will sell it at a reasonable price. But then you get other people who, have their kind of pride and joy. It's like housing. A lot of times you think for sale by owner is very cheap. A lot of times the reason things end up in for sale by owner is because they'll have a salesperson come out there, a licensed salesperson come out there, and they'll tell them what that house is worth, and they'll say, wait a minute, it's worth way more than that, and so they'll put it on the market for that. And a lot of times they're overpriced, if anything. And also, Alaska is a non-disclosure state, which means for tax purposes and other things, you don't have to release. The government doesn't know exactly what you paid for a house in that case. And that kind of transfers almost into vehicles where people are very hesitant to you don't have to put it on the motor vehicle registration up here. You don't put your purchase price because there's no sales tax involved. In other states, man, that is a huge deal. And there's always this lowballing where you put a lower price or whatever so that you can minimize the amount of sales tax, and then you get all these hassles with the state on that. It can be a nightmare. I bought a vehicle one time in Alabama, which had like a 3% sales tax on vehicles, and then I subsequently moved to Nevada, as military. And when I went to register it there, they said, well, we have 8% sales tax, and although you've had this car 2 years, our sales tax is higher, so you owe us that 5% difference on this used vehicle. I mean, anyway, states will do that. It's good to be in Alaska when that happens. Post-purchase activities, looking at the what it's going to cost you in terms of maintenance and the rest of that to keep it going. Many times you'll have these vehicles that come with some sort of bumper-to-bumper coverage, but again, I had a Canadian friend who bought 2 new vehicles when he arrived up here, and we would just laugh at him. Every time he'd take his car in for service, for free service, he'd come back with a pretty hefty bill for all the things that weren't covered. His interior air filter was contaminated, and his windshield wipers were dangerous. And he's paying dealer prices for all this stuff. It's $180 for a set of wipers and a interior air filter. So anyway, they go back through all these different items. Let me jump to this video really quick so we can see just especially this highlights the issue of what I was talking about with the payments, where they monkey with that.
If your holiday shopping includes browsing for a new car, buyer beware. Dateline's chief consumer correspondent Lee Thompson followed a woman named Tori on her car buying trip. Tori went to Town and Country Ford, owned by Sonic Automotive in Charlotte, North Carolina. You might be surprised to see what Dateline's hidden cameras found. Watch.
The smell of a new car, the touch, the look, a shiny new Mustang, and it's hers. Payments she can afford and a salesman who treated her well. But this consumer advocate says Tori's just been taken for a ride.
They probably made more than $5,000 or $6,000 on her in extra profit, in profit that she did not have to pay on the car, on fees, and on the financing.
Ramar Sutton has been investigating the car industry for 20 years. He is the author of Don't Get Taken Every Time, a guide to buying a car. Dateline asked Sutton to evaluate Tori's deal.
When a dealership sees a person like Tori who is trusting, who has thousands of dollars in cash, who listens to them and doesn't argue, the entire dealership comes to a halt, because this is the home run they've been waiting for this week, maybe.
Your payments are about $360 a month.
Tori was pretty proud of herself after she got Big Al to lower her monthly payment from $360 to somewhere around $280.
Because I'm working for you, obviously, until I get you to say yes.
Let's figure that out. 360 times 60 months is $21,600. 280 times 60 months is $16,800. Tori thought she was saving $4,800.
Is this the best deal I'm going to see?
It's the best deal. It's the best deal.
Okay.
But wait, all that turns out to be just so much razzle-dazzle.
And you will be approved, and you can take the copies today.
But what Big Al never told Tori was while he did lower her monthly payment, he did it by increasing the number of payments. Watch. 280 times 60 months is $16,800. But Big Al extended Tori's loan to 72 months. 280 times 72 is $20,160. An extra $3,360 that Tori will have to pay. The actual price of the car didn't change at all.
If they work you on payments, you never know what you're paying. You have no idea what you're paying for the car. And most of us are payment buyers, and it is the most dangerous way to buy a car. Dangerous meaning very expensive.
Tori's then passed off to the finance manager at Town and Country Ford, who starts working on an interest rate. The only hitch, he says, Tori's earnings, about $1,000 a month, aren't quite enough for a new Mustang. But with a stroke of the pen, he solves that.
But if I make that 0 and 8, now there's always a chance that they could also make us prove your income.
Yeah.
Tori's credit application now says she makes $1,800 instead of $1,000 a month.
I'm going to go with 1,800. Whether I put 1,500 or 1,800, something matter, but I'm going to need a minimum of 1,800.
At the time, our producer who was with her asked,
But she's not going to get in trouble for that, is she?
No, there's no way you can get in trouble for it. It's all just about, basically all this is for is to get your loan approved.
well, he was wrong. Falsifying a credit application could be a felony. Time to talk to finance manager Eric Bird.
I'm Lee Thompson from
Nice to meet you.
Dateline NBC.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Sonic declined an on-camera interview, but wrote Dateline saying what we captured on our hidden cameras are clear violations of our company's policies. Sonic said it is looking to enhance controls to keep this from happening again. Is it possible what happened to Tori was just an isolated incident, some rogue employees? This man says no.
And I see hundreds of new people going in this industry that are being trained to do exactly what they trained me to do, to be a liar, a thief, and a crook. And it's got to stop.
Yeah, so you can tell why. I think I showed that video, and anyway, didn't make any friends. But it's, there's other things going on. There's also, just another kind of aside, is that there's you may see it now and then where they say selling the car at below cost. Nissan used to do this a lot, and I was buying a new truck at the time, quite some years ago. But anyway, the guy came to me and said, that we really do get the rebate back on the end of it, because they're saying they sell it below invoice. Well, meaning that they had to pay Nissan more for that truck than what they were selling it to me. And that was a truthful statement, but what he didn't tell me, or at least initially, was that for every vehicle sold, and this is a common practice, that, for example, with Nissan, the dealership got $2,500 per vehicle at the end of the year as a bonus for every vehicle sold. So, that's a agreement entered into ahead of time. That's not a contingency type thing. So this wasn't much of a truck, believe me, but it was, sold for, I don't know, $6,000 or whatever. And he could show me where they paid, $6,100 for it. But in reality, with their $2,500 that they know they're getting back at the end of the year, they weren't at cost. They're still making money. And it was a loss leader anyway. This was, I was overseas, and the riots in LA were going on at that time, so it was kind of a dicey deal. It's one of those one at this price. Well, I was that guy. I went there that day. I'm here for that truck. Well, we want you to, and they want to upsell you to something else, but I wouldn't have any of it. But anyway, I bought the truck, but even then they still made money on it. So when they run through these steps, they have the pre-shopping activities. Again, you can use some of these admins, car and driver, but most of these, the U.S. kind of auto media, if you want to call it that, they're pretty fawning. They very seldom come out and say, something's really garbage, as opposed to, the British media with shows like Top Gear that will just savage different vehicles. It's kind of interesting. We don't have time today, but I'll show you one of those videos sometime. But they'll just completely tear down a vehicle. You can use Edmunds and car and driver and some of these things, but again, the pricing data is just not usually accurate. It's either too high or too low, and it's not reflective of what vehicles are actually going for. So there's plenty of opportunity in business from a business perspective, and that's why you see so many used car dealers or people selling them privately, because there's very little regulation on the prices. When they talk about credit scores, something around above a 700 is kind of the number you're looking for. But again, typically you don't need to pay to get that score. But if you do, if you want to get a credit report just out of trivia, a number around about 700 is good, which means that you'll get the better interest rate. That guy actually changing that lady's income, that's fraud. I mean, and again, those limits are kind of set to keep people from getting in over their head. So anyway, evaluation of alternatives. We don't have these types of things up here. The big CarMax and some of the big, there's another big car, kind of a super type thing. Super dealer down in low 48. I can't remember who they are. Carfax, that's a whole different thing. That will cover service histories, and if a car's been in a body shop and things like that. It is important to perhaps look at those.
But you got to keep in mind that it has to go to a registered shop to be registered in there. More importantly, when you're buying a vehicle, especially a used vehicle, make sure that the title is clear, and you want to see the title before you agree to a price. A lot of times they'll have what they call a salvage title, which means that the car has been, substantially damaged to the point of being totaled out and then rebuilt. So the reason why I say it's not as much of a problem up there in Alaska, because we don't have the same degree of flooding and stuff. When you have an incident like a big hurricane in the lower 48, there'll be a bunch of cars flood on the market that have taken some serious, saltwater damage that pretty much destroys a car in a hurricane, and then they'll end up pretty much spread all over the U.S. being sold under salvage titles and at a great price, but the electronics and everything else don't hold up well with saltwater. So, anyway, but Carfax will perhaps give you that information. Leasing an automobile. They usually have a teaser rate that comes in there, but you got to put money up front. You do a monthly payment, and then you got to give the car back. And depending on the condition, you may have to come up with some more money. So, dealerships like it because you're always in a new car, or more or less, and you're always kind of flipping the car. But you're pretty much, you are always with a payment, and you're never with anything, even equity. Not that equity in vehicles is much, but anyway, you're left with nothing. Negotiation for purchase price. There's some new things that have come out, like this True Car, and they're all kind of knockoffs on the same thing, where they try to get you a better pre-negotiated price. Has anybody had experience with those? They seem, I don't know. A lot of times when they're orchestrated and kind of run by the dealerships, they may not have your best interest at heart. But a lot of times with research and some sort of comparison shopping, you may also have a credit union or a bank that also has a buying service that might have a better deal. But again, when you're using those types of services, you're usually looking at new cars. For used cars, though, like I say, it's very difficult. You might want to compare prices to the lower 48 and find out if it's worth even going down there to get it and having it shipped up or dragging it back yourself. But I know a number of friends of mine who, will buy a pretty large diesel truck and, pick it, and it's well worth their time to pick it up down in the lower 48. So the purchase price, again, the financial alternatives, many times if you can walk in there with having already talked to your bank and find out, what they can get you in terms of a rate. If they can get you a pretty decent rate, you don't necessarily want to inform the car salesman that, because they're usually not going to dicker as much, because they tend to make some money off financing the vehicle to you as well. So you would go in there and see what their financial deal is, and also find out what the price would be for a cash buyer, because essentially you would be a cash buyer if you came in there with a loan, with a check from your own bank. So rebates, low interest financing, APR, all that stuff. It's competitive, but yeah, you can figure out what rates are, on bankrate.com. But a lot of times the car dealership is going to make some money off the interest rate, so they'll sort of play that game where you can have the very low interest rate, but we're not going to move much on the price, or we'll move a great deal on the price, but you're going to be paying a higher than market rate. So many times it's better to keep those two things not linked, the price and the interest rate. And then, like you said, the monthly payments, that's where the problems are. Lemon laws, in the lower 48, someplace like California, for example, yeah, there's very strict lemon laws. But it has to, vehicle has to be turned back into the dealer for the same problem for a number of times, and then boom, it's covered by a lemon law. But it depends on the consumer affairs, and in that part, Alaska is not as well known as some of the other states, but may make the vehicle prices a bit lower. Well, it should have, Not to say they're low here, but that's a, coverage of those lemon laws is a cost that the dealerships will essentially pass on. Operation costs. There's some interesting things now, especially with some of the hybrids that, when the batteries tend to go on those things, that's not a cheap expense, Priuses and some of these other things. And it is something that's not going to affect the new car buyer, because the battery will usually go through those 3-4 years. But for the person who buys one of those used, you may be looking at a significant expense. Anybody drive a Prius or have any experience with those batteries? Anyway, when they were first coming out, they were talking about, this basically a $4,000 bill that was going to be due. But now that they're out in the market, at the time when they're brand new, nobody really had an experience fixing them. And then the maintenance, different vehicles, different prices. Generally, if it's done by the dealership, it's usually a bit pricier. And also if it's done by, if it's included in the purchase price, that may be cheaper, but if the dealership is, in another town or something like that, it may necessitate towing it. We had an Audi one time that we had to tow about 60 miles every time it needed anything done, because it was covered by the dealer, but you had to get it to the dealer. So it was a bit of a problem. Anyway, you're used to, some of the aftermarket, especially if you're driving a car like a Subaru or something like that. There's specialty people. Some of the Ford truck guys, there's, diesel experts that are different than the dealer, and obviously they're doing pretty well in business, so they must have a competitive advantage. The complaint situation, obviously taking it back to the place of purchase is the quickest and easiest. A lot of times they will say, oh, no, you have to deal directly with the manufacturer. And I definitely try and stiff arm that. Especially if it's something, even like a brand new TV, will say, if you have problems, you cannot return it to the store. They sort of put those stickers on there, but when there's a problem, in fact, I just took one back and they took it back. When you do have real problems, you might have to work your way up the company structure. Most of the car dealers, like say Lithia, for example, they're part of a huge conglomerate. Worthington, there's not too many just strictly local dealerships, and then the consumer agencies. But again, if it's a government agency, a lot of times it's can be more difficult in terms of time. And Better Business Bureau, I've taken things to them, but I've never got resolution. But then ultimately you can take legal action. Now again, Alaska is a loser pays state, so if you sue somebody, you have to be prepared to suck up the cost if your claim is found not to be valid. So that's a little different than other states. So they talk about returning the place of purchase. You're going to find their number more than likely off the internet. Long distance information doesn't work in many cases. Consumer agencies. Then you may also find that I'm going to take you guys to court. Well, you may find out that somewhere in the fine print you signed away your rights to take somebody to court. You agreed to mediation or arbitration, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just recognized that the courts are slow and that it can be very expensive. And so you have two different things. You have mediation and arbitration. And sometimes you'll hear, binding arbitration or non-binding mediation. That's just redundant. People know that mediation is just a third party. Usually it's a retired judge, somebody who's got some significant legal experience, but now is in a retired mode, and or arbitrator. Arbitrator, both sides are explained, and they go with that person makes a decision, and their decision is more or less final. So you're kind of stuck with that. I actually got into one of these situations with AT&T. They jacked me up on something, and whole bunch of bogus charges when I switched phones, and they whatever extended my contract, and then they said I owed them early contract termination fees, and so I fought it, and sure enough, I was going to go to small claims court, and found out it was covered under arbitration, but we didn't even make it that far because finally they knew that I certainly wasn't going away, and a lot of times that's just it, just showing the intent, and they looked at all the documentation I had, and they caved and said, no, you don't owe us any money, and refunded what I had paid. So again, they're not counting on people being persistent. If you're a persistent person, again, you got to have a little bit of time to do it, but if you're organized and you, again, keep letters and emails on file, you can generally win. State and consumer protection, federal agencies, there's a list of those folks, but typically overwhelmed. I've usually gotten things resolved directly with the company. I've never actually ended up in court, although it's looked like it was going to get close a couple times. And mediation and arbitration is not a big deal. Small claims court, class action lawsuits, using a lawyer. So small claims court is always an alternative. It costs about $70 or something. You file down on, what was that, 3rd Avenue or whatever. I did this one time. It completely backfired on me. I would not recommend it. The lady, it was about a horse thing, and I didn't have a very strong case, and she opted to take this thing. She opted to elevate it to a jury trial over a silly horse breeding thing, and she was just going to make a federal case out of it because she knew loser was going to pay, and she knew that the contract, what we said, as opposed to what was actually in writing, what was in writing was kind of flimsy. And it was a gut check. She called my bluff and knew that I probably wasn't willing to risk it. So anyway, small claims court's an alternative, but just be careful in this state because the loser pays idea. Class action lawsuits. Class action lawsuits are usually for nuisance type things. Sometimes they can be fairly large, but definitely expect one to happen here with the Volkswagen people. Anybody who's bought a Volkswagen, your resale value has been diminished. The company's image and the product itself has been damaged. So, let's say you got a $30,000 Jetta or something. Are you going to go sue Volkswagen individually? Probably not. What you would do, and if you're a Jetta owner, you'll probably be getting a letter in the mail from some lawyer. And what he's doing is he's assembling a class. And he's saying, all these reasons. You were, Volkswagen cheated, lied, did all this stuff, and, you've been harmed, and you want to join this class. If you do, you opt into the class, and then this lawyer takes all this forward, and this lawyer's going to make a killing. He's going to get a huge, huge award, of which he's going to get, maybe 40% or something in cash. And then each one of you is going to get, I'm even stretching it to say you'll get 60% of your little divided up thing. But anyway, the lawyer's going to get wealthy. You might get something back. But if you opt for the class, then you're, taking this forward individually is gone. You've waived that. So, Volkswagen's only going to get sued once by you, and you want to do it individually. You got that kind of time and money, or you're going to join this class and have another lawyer do it on your behalf and the behalf of everybody in that class. So that's how class action lawsuits work. Using a lawyer, which is fine. Usually a letter from the lawyer will be enough, but lawyers are $250 an hour basically, and they don't do a whole lot for $250. In an hour, they can't generate a whole bunch of work, so it's going to get expensive. Legal aid societies, if you're destitute, maybe that'll help you out, but if you can pay for a lawyer, they're probably going to tell you to go back and get a real lawyer. Prepaid legal services, I've never found one that covers anything that I'm involved in. They certainly don't do things like divorce or child custody, that kind of stuff. There's no prepayment for that. So for minor things, it might work out. And personal consumer protection, work with reputable companies, exaggerated offers. If you do all those things, if it seems like too good a deal, it probably is. So be careful with that.
Yeah, you have to be smart with that. So, the personal finance term project. So, what we're going to talk about is just how to come up with this plan for to ensure your financial security from here going forward. Again, this isn't you want to be a miser and you're just trying to be the next Trump or something like that. No, if you do the math, you'll realize that to be in retirement, even using today's numbers, you basically need to have a nest egg of about $1 million, because especially now the market is all over the place. And so if you're figuring, typically you figure maybe 8%, maybe 10%. Right now I don't know that you're getting that, but anyway, if you're getting 8 or 10%, you're looking at $80,000 to $100,000, which for a lot of people that's kind of the price of the lifestyle that they're used to. So anyway, for the project itself, what you're going to look at is kind of fast forward yourself, or maybe you're already there. Maybe you're just a part-time student, you're already established in a career. But for most of you, I think you'll look forward to when you're actually out and working, probably around 5 years from now. So you can look at a thing called Glassdoor.com. You can look at other sites and see, hey, I'm going to be, say a registered nurse, or I'm going to be a accountant. What's that pay in Anchorage? And there'll be some, self-reported numbers. And a lot of times they're probably pretty accurate. It's funny that when Snowden, the Booz Allen guy, he claimed that he didn't have a high school degree, but he's really good with computers. I mean, seriously, even people within the firm said the guy was sharp. And he was getting decent money, but he wasn't getting $200,000 a year like he claimed to. But within the firm, people are just like, that dude's getting $200,000, because everybody's like, I'm not even getting half of that, But anyway, those financial numbers are usually difficult to get, especially if you work for a corporation, because they don't want people, comparing, hey, how much you get, and you can get fired for that kind of stuff. So something like Glassdoor.com, where people anonymously report how much they earn, is one way to figure that out. In terms of financial details, again, try and keep it as anonymous as possible. This report ultimately is for your own use, so you may want to use numbers that you think are realistic, but I don't want your actual details, so the fictitious data, to protect your privacy. And if you do put in real numbers, certainly don't say that. But anyway, this is a plan for financial success. Things are changing quickly here. The world is. I don't know if you guys watched the thing in Russia with Russia and Syria yesterday, but Russia is kind of now the new superpower in town. So I mean, the world is changing quickly, and within your lifetime, you may see some big changes. So you definitely want to be prepared for it. It should be a 4 to 5 page typewritten paper, and it's mainly how you're going to employ the different means that we talk about in the course. We'll talk more about insurance, we'll talk more about housing, we'll talk more about investments, but how you're going to get to where you want to be. College savings, comfortable retirement, if you are going to have a family. And again, the point of insurance is for the people that are left behind, that their lifestyle and their goals in life are still attainable even without you being there. So by its very nature, the amount of money that you need to be insured for will go down as you build up a nest egg, and more of those goals are met. Once the kids are through college, you no longer have to set that money aside. When the house is paid off, you no longer have to have that cushion in there. Student loans, that's kind of a generational thing, though, millennial type thing, where maybe not at UAA, but at other schools, or perhaps you're going to go to grad school or some
professional accreditation or whatever, and you're going to have whopping student debt, by the time people pay off that debt, they could be at 30 or beyond, and generations before, that money was being used for investment. So if people are slow to start building up their retirement, again, from the time value of money, it's pretty devastating if it slows your investing at all. Social Security. This is just kind of a reality check of people think, I paid into Social Security, I'm going to be good. Two things with that: nobody's going to be good living off just solely Social Security. It's a pretty meager lifestyle if you're just living off that. And then the other thing is, if you do have a bit of money, it's also probably going to be means tested, which means that if you have much in the way of savings and an income from your investments, you won't even be eligible for it. So all that money you paid in there, it's more of a welfare thing than it is a return of your own money that you put in there. So anyway, you need to look at that. Life insurance. In most cases, unless you already have a policy, but for most people, you're probably going to be looking at term insurance. Do your own evaluation. We're going to talk more about insurance in the upcoming weeks, but like we said, the prevailing wisdom about term insurance, number one, it's just so much easier. You can calculate your liabilities, and you can figure out, how much it's going to cost you to maintain that lifestyle for your loved ones if you happen to die, and you can update it as need be, and it's just you don't need a salesman to explain it to you. It's just very easy to work out. Does the company have a pension plan? If you're, say, like I was in the military, you may not need $1 million because you've got a retirement that is a stream of income. Granted, they're not much. Let's say it's $50,000 or something, but hey, that's better than needing $100,000 a year. 50, you're at least going to have some lifestyle left. And there's other things that do that still. There's still a few traditional trades. A former student was a longshoreman. He'd been a longshoreman since he was 18, and so he already was vested in a pension plan with that. He's not even through college yet. So you may have situations like that where you have a pension. And again, even for educators and a lot of public service type things, it's what they call a cafeteria plan now, where a traditional pension plan isn't out there. They will have some sort of incentive or some sort of matching, but you're usually going to be putting that away in 401ks, some tax deferred account, and trying to get you your $1 million. So again, if you come up with this plan now and start implementing it, you really can, soften the blow. You won't be somebody in their 50s who's having to, sock away $20,000 or $30,000 a year to build up a retirement nest egg, because you should already be on a pretty good glide path and should just need to be maintaining your investments rather than trying to catch up, double up, catch up. The quality of life later, and especially for kids. We're in uncharted territory. The market is just keeps getting rocketed, and they really don't have any quick fixes. There's no bullets or whatever to fix this one. That we're already so far in debt, and some of the other stimulus type things that they did, they don't have those sorts of programs even available right now. So, and globally, places like China and Europe, and they're dragging it all down as well. So, this is going to be a tough situation to climb out, and perhaps locally it may be even worse. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but you certainly got to prepare for the worst. Any questions on?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
On the report, can we have spreadsheets and stuff like that to show?
Yeah.
the data on-
Spreadsheets, graphics. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
'Cause I mean, 4 pages. I mean, that's a lot of words, but
Yeah, it doesn't end up being that bad, but yeah, but again, a picture can speak volumes. So yeah, I'd certainly do that if you want. If it helps your story, if that's how you work. But yeah, using Excel where it auto calculates down and does the auto sums and formulas, especially if you're going to save it, then you can just go in there and adjust those numbers later and see how you're doing towards your goal. Might be interesting. Any other? All right, then. We will see you